Hello and welcome to the Casual Cinecast, powered by Cinelinx. My name is Chris, and with me as always is Mike. How are you doing today, sir?
I'm doing pretty, all right. I am ready to talk about Dragged Across Concrete.
Yeah, what a title, huh?
I know.
And also with us is Justin. How are you doing today, sir?
Yeah, I'm doing okay. Still trying to get over my sickness from last week, but, you know, slowly but surely on the way. So if I sound funny, that's why. My throat still kind of hurts.
You sound great.
So send all the angry emails about how annoying Justin sounds directly to him.
Yeah, well, I figured if we were going to get those emails, it would have been... We would have had a bunch by now about how annoying I sound.
Yeah, that might be true. All right, and, as always, if this is your first time joining us, we like to start off every episode talking about what's on our minds, which is usually the media that we've been watching or reading. And then we move into our feature review. As I mentioned earlier, we're talking today about Dragged Across Concrete.
Yeah, and don't forget that each month we review a film from the Criterion Collection, which is voted on by you, the listeners. So go check out our latest episode on The Princess Bride, and look forward to our next episode on Safety Last coming out very soon.
Very, very soon.
As soon as Chris can get it edited soon.
Yeah. It's my first time,
Come on,
guys,
Chris.
so give me a break.
Yeah, anyone listening now, if you want to hear Chris's first attempt at editing an episode, go find our Safety Last episode.
Yeah.
And then judge
Any
it.
feedback is great.
So if you want to vote on the next Criterion film that we're going to do, you can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Casual Cinecast. You can also ask us questions there about the films that we're going to be reviewing each week. You can also send your questions to casualcinemedia at gmail.com. And then, of course, as always, don't forget to go onto iTunes, give us a 5-star review. Let us know what you think of the show. It helps other people find the show. Also subscribe. Also tell a friend about the show if you like us.
Also subscribe a friend to the show.
That's a good idea, too. Just do it. Consider well. They'll find us in their podcast app and not know what to do, listen to us, and fall in love, ideally.
Yep, just like that.
It's the logical series of events.
Yeah.
It's the only way it could happen.
It'll be like a meet cute, only between our podcast and them on their phone.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if that reference really worked right there, but...
I like meet cute, so I was really on board with it.
Yeah. Yeah. I just wanted to use that. What? You don't know what a meet cute is?
No, I do not.
But
It's
are you
like,
being serious?
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm sure there's a lot of people who may not know what a meet cute is. It's like in a romantic comedy, two people will bump into each other and not get along right away, and then eventually they'll fall in love. Right? They have to meet in some kind of unconventional but still charming way.
I see.
That's called a meet cute. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just when the romantic leads meet each other.
Yeah, 22 Jump Street actually did a really awesome joke about a meet cute, because between the bromance between Channing Tatum and some other guy in that movie. But anyway, it's funny.
Jonah Hill.
No, not Jonah Hill. That's the main character. I don't know who Jonah Hill is. It's the blonde guy from Community.
Okay.
Joel McHale?
No, the guy with the small nipples in Community that Britta dated for a while.
Oh, right, yeah.
He's in a lot of stuff. He's that guy kind of guy.
My one frame of reference for that guy is that he played the young Lloyd Christmas in the Dumb and Dumber.
Yes.
A prequel.
Yeah, that guy. What are we talking about? What are we doing?
Meet cutes.
We were talking about meet cutes, but we should probably try to talk about what's on our minds. I don't know.
Yeah, let's try that.
You on the mark!
So, Justin.
Yes.
What's been on your mind this week?
Well, this week in my sick state, I stayed home from work a couple of days, and that gave me plenty of time to finish a series that I've been watching lately that is on Hulu. Actually, it used to be on Netflix, which was where I first heard of it probably 5 or 6 years ago, but I never finished it there. But now that I found out it was on Hulu, I started watching it. But that series is The Story of Film, an Odyssey.
Nice.
Are either of you guys familiar with that?
Yeah, I remember when that came out. I wanted to watch it. It was a big deal, when it was coming on. But back then, streaming services weren't as prevalent as they are now. So it just kind of went off my radar, and I kind of forgot about it until you started bringing it up.
Yeah, we actually both found out about this together. Chris from War Starts at Midnight podcast let us know that it was on Hulu when we met up with him a few months back now. But yeah, I finished it myself just recently.
Yeah, it's basically a documentary with 15 one-hour episodes that tell the story of film and cinema, basically the history of film. And what I want to point out about this particular documentary is that going into it, I have studied a lot about the history of film, and I've taken some history of film classes. So I feel like I have like a pretty good base level of knowledge going in, and I learned a whole lot from this. And the reason that is, and what I find most interesting about this particular series, is that if you go in expecting like the stuff that you get taught in like a history of film class, you know, you get a little bit of that. Like he'll touch on that stuff, but he goes to like sort of the fringes and outside of like the mainstream film history. So basically, even someone with like that base knowledge, like it wasn't just a repeat of a bunch of stuff that I already knew. Like I learned a whole lot. I saw a lot of films I've never heard of, directors I've never heard of. And, you know, that's what's fun about some of these film docs, you know. Ever since I got into film, I've started watching different docs about film, and they kind of give you like a little checklist in a way of movies that you want to go check out. There's so many movies I've seen because I saw them in a film doc.
Yeah, like that that film doc that I think it was
Z
you,
Channel.
Chris, who the Z Channel one that I think you let us borrow that a long time ago.
Yeah.
Back when Justin and I were roommates, and that gave us like 20 rare obscure movies to like seek out and find, and some of which are still rare. And I'm glad anyway, I know exactly what you're talking about. Cool.
Yeah, some of which were probably obscure to us at the time, but aren't as obscure in the grand scheme of things now.
Well, that may be true as well.
Sure.
But
But basically, I say that, you know, it's a bit of a warning about this doc too, because there's a tendency to go into these sort of film docs and you get excited to like hear maybe like more details about all the stuff you already know, and you have this idea of film history cemented in your head, you know, where we focus a lot on like all of the mainstream stuff, right? All of the big things that were going on. And in some ways this can kind of feel incomplete, I think, because he skips over some big name directors and big movies that you've heard of and you know are an important part of film history, to touch on these smaller stuff. So like some of the complaints that I've heard about this one is that like, oh, he didn't even talk a lot about Jean-Pierre Melville, or, you know, he didn't talk a ton on Kurosawa or Rashomon or, you know, Pulp Fiction and Tarantino in the 90s. Like he doesn't touch on a lot of that stuff. He goes elsewhere. Yeah. So it's just kind of a warning, I think, like consider this a way to get the fringes of film history with a little bit of the backbone, and not like a way to revisit all of the major stuff that you already know about. Or if you don't know anything about film, you know, maybe there are other history of film things that you could maybe watch that give you a little bit more of the more well-known popular backbone. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right. Yeah. Like, so for a movie nerd like you or me or Chris, it's probably pretty enjoyable and like pretty rewarding. But for someone who maybe like isn't such a movie nerd primarily, but like wants to learn, or like wants to get like a stepping off point and like a better understanding of like the important films that, you know, movie cinephiles need to see, it may leave you wanting there a little.
Yeah, and there's actually a couple of them that are pretty good. Like if you're in that category, you know, the Martin Scorsese, there's 2 documentaries, like his Journey Through Italy. If you're interested in Italian films, is a good one. And then what was his other one? His like it was through American cinema.
Yeah, his Journey Through American cinema or films. I can't remember what it's called.
And then the Z Channel one's very good too, because it's not necessarily, it's all about the Z Channel that was on in California before HBO. And so it does some obscure, more like foreign films, and even maybe some silent films. I don't remember, I haven't seen it in a long time, but yeah. Plus I think it's got a good story in it too.
Yeah, I'm not sure about one that goes over like the whole story of cinema history, like a documentary necessarily. I think like a college course probably gives you that little backbone. One documentary that I could recommend is A Decade Under the Influence, which is 3 1-hour episodes, but that's purely on the 70s. Late 60s into the 70s American film movement.
But what a decade.
Yeah, there's so many films in that, like even that one probably has the issue of like, I can't believe you didn't talk about that film, for people who know a lot about 70s films, because there's so much good stuff. But those are all, I think, really good examples if you're into this sort of documentary. But this one is definitely, it will supplement even the most avid of like film nerds. and add to your knowledge.
Yeah, and I think you could start here too. You may be expecting to see more prominent directors and films, but I think this is as good a place as any to start. You know, it's 15 hours. It has like 2 episodes just on like the birth of cinema, which I think is really great. And in fact, that's what, when I was watching those, that's what inspired us to watch a silent film.
Yeah, for the Casualty Criterion.
Yeah, to do Safety Last. So, yeah, I think that this is, if you're into film and you want to learn a little bit more, you know, this is absolutely great.
Yeah.
I think.
I think the other caveat is the narrator's voice, because that's a big thing I heard about this film, is that a lot of people had issues with it. I personally don't. It's kind of soothing. It's kind of calm.
Yeah.
And not really in your face and not speaking, well, I was going to say not speaking down to you, but there are times where he has some pretty strong opinions about certain things. But I think his voice takes a little bit of getting used to, and I've heard of it turning off people. But I think if you're into film at all, if you're listening to this podcast and you're not my mom, then, you know, you probably have some interest in film, and regardless of his voice, you'll find this fascinating from start to finish.
Yeah, agreed.
Awesome. And that's on Hulu, The Story of Film?
Yeah, which I found out recently that with my Spotify subscription, they've now added a Hulu subscription at no additional cost.
Yeah, my girlfriend was just talking about that like today, actually.
Yeah, so
well, that actually works out perfectly for me because I just canceled Hulu, but we have a Spotify account, so perfect.
There you go.
Bada bing.
Yeah, but that is basically all I have on my mind this week. So we will move on to Mike. What is on your mind?
This week, I finally got to see The Wife, starring Glenn Close and Jonathan Pryce. Have you guys got a chance to see this movie yet?
I haven't. I've heard mixed things about it.
Yeah, I can understand that. So,
yeah. I
this
also
is the
haven't,
movie.
by the way.
What'd you say?
I also haven't seen it, but I have heard mixed things. I know a friend of the show who guested on an episode a while back, Matt Ward, was very big on The Wife, if I remember correctly. So I heard a lot of good stuff from him.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a movie that I liked. I really did. I think it's not great. I don't believe it's shot very well, is the thing. Is like the DP, I guess. Like it just seems like there's a lot of just big lights shining directly on people. It just seems really boringly lit. I think that's the biggest problem for me. Is it feels like a play almost in a lot of places. Just because it just seems like a really boring light just shining down, not very creative in the camera angles or anything like that. But that said, Glenn Close and Jonathan Pryce are great. Absolutely wonderful.
Right. She was nominated, Glenn Close, right?
Yeah. She was nominated for Academy Award and lost to Olivia Colman.
Do you still feel like Olivia Colman should have won that?
Well, yeah, I do. I think this movie feels like a little Oscar baity, but
right.
like the movie itself isn't good enough for that. As far as like its production values and things like that, it seems very indie. I think it's a good role though, and Glenn Close is great in it. I don't want to like undersell her. I think she's wonderful, and I think her nomination was well deserved. If I hadn't loved Olivia Colman so much, she probably would be my frontrunner for Best Actress. You know?
Yeah.
Basically, I don't really want to give too much away, but long story short, it's about a husband and wife. The husband is a really well-known author, and their son is an aspiring author. And Glenn Close is a stay-at-home wife. And they're going out on a book tour, and let's just say that the facade of their marriage starts to kind of come unraveled very slowly, you know?
Mm-hmm.
That's all. I'll just kind of keep it short, I guess, because you guys really haven't seen it. But Glenn Close is really great in this. Jonathan Pryce, who was most recently on Game of Thrones, and he's in a million other things, but I think most people will know him from Game of Thrones. He's really different in this, and I don't know. I think it's actually a movie that I think could have been better with a better director, and I think it's kind of a shame.
Did you mention who directed it? I'm sorry if you did.
I did not. It was directed by, forgive me, Bjorn Runge? Bjorn Runge. Bjorn Runge. Known for, let's see, Daybreak, Mouth to Mouth, and The Wife are like the three the three top. I was reading the word happy on IMDb. The three top movies on IMDb. They also directed a movie called Happy End in 2011. Any of these ring a bell to you guys?
No, not at all. And it seems to be sparsing his movies out. He's trying to Terrence Malick his filmography here with his Daybreak was 2003, Mouth to Mouth 2005, then 2011 The Happy End, and now 2017 for The Wife. It's like he's taking his time between films.
Doing some TV episodes.
Yeah, maybe he's a theater director more than a film director, and that would give the reasons why it felt more like a play, or maybe it's not as interestingly lit.
Right. And to be fair, I don't think that was what they were concerned with, you know? And it's not a movie that necessarily needs all that stuff. Like, it works just fine without it. Like, I was still able to enjoy it, and it's still a good movie. I just think that it's not going to hold a candle to, like... Well, I guess the best thing I can compare it to would be like The Tale with Laura Dern.
Okay, that makes sense.
That we watched. I think it's made better than that one, but it kind of has like this... you can't help but escape the feeling that like the actors are where all the money went. You know?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So, anyway, that's The Wife. It's good. Good movie, but I would... probably just, you know, kind of wait for it to be cheap somewhere and watch it when it's streaming somewhere if you can. I wouldn't spend money on it.
How did you watch it?
Through the new Netflix plan that I fired up. The new Blu-ray DVD
Makes
plan
sense.
in the mail. Next I have Can You Ever Forgive Me? I'm catching up on my best actresses.
That is my next film, too, that I'll get when I finally send back Pete's Dragon.
Yeah. Mine is sitting there on the counter right now. And then I have All Is Lost with Robert Redford, the J.C. Chandor movie.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
You fill out his discography. That's bands. Filmography.
Yeah. There you go. All right.
And now we know what's going to be on What's His Mind next week.
Yeah, probably. There you go. There's a little taste. So that's all I have on The Wife right now. Chris, what do you have on your mind this week?
Yeah, so this weekend I saw two movies, like at the theater. I kind of did a double header. And the first one I watched was Beach Bum, which is starring Matthew McConaughey and directed by Harmony Korine. I haven't watched as many Harmony Korine movies as I probably should have. I do remember watching Gummo a long time ago as, you know, a youth, and it's more of a movie that I remember being a novelty as much as a good movie, like, because it's so strange and so weird that you would go to your other friends and be like, have you seen Gummo yet? You know, like, it's such a strange movie. But I don't remember it being a great movie or a good movie, and I need to revisit it. But that's just how I remember it. And Beach Bum is not as weird as Gummo, but it's also not great. It's starring Matthew McConaughey, and he is playing a role that he was born to play. Like, this is, you know, like Matthew McConaughey's role. Like, it was probably written for him, but it's he plays a beach bum poet that is always drunk and always high, and he goes off on an adventure to write a book. And on the way, he meets all sorts of widely varying characters, you know, played by different and to different levels of success by different celebrities making cameos in the film. I think two of the really good ones are Martin Lawrence actually has a really funny segment in here. I think it's pretty funny.
That's
and
surprising
then the other
coming
one,
from Martin Lawrence, and
yeah, exactly.
the word funny being in the same sentence.
And then the other one was Zac Efron. I thought was really good in this as well. Anyways, so it's an interesting film. The only problems I have with this film is Matthew McConaughey's character is completely unlikable to me. And for some reason, every single character in this movie loves Matthew McConaughey. And he is charming, but I just don't see, like, he has a daughter. Matthew McConaughey has a daughter who just reveres him, but he like basically has to be convinced to show up to her wedding, you know, like, and he shows up late and disrupts the whole thing. He basically doesn't think about anybody but himself in this whole film, which may be the point of this film. It may be that it's white rich men can get away with whatever. That's the only point I can come away with this film, because Matthew McConaughey bumbles his way around. He's a rich man, and he treats everybody like shit to a certain extent. That might be the point, but it's not clear that there's even a point to the film. So ultimately, there's interesting, fun things in this film. Like, there's multiple, just like the biggest joints you've ever seen. I think this will be like a stoner cult movie, because the joints are just gigantic, bigger than cigars, and it's, those things are funny, but ultimately they don't carry the movie. And at 90 minutes, it should be a short, quick film, but it felt a lot longer than 90 minutes.
That's just the worst, isn't it?
Yeah, you're like, when is this over? And there are parts that I like. It's just I don't like the whole film together.
Right.
Yeah.
And this film kind of came out of nowhere, right? Like, I had not heard of this before I went to go see Us at the Alamo Drafthouse, and they had Beach Bum branding everywhere and like Beach Bum menu items, and showed a trailer for it. And that's the first time I'd even heard of it.
I think it played either at Sundance or South by Southwest, and I heard about it then.
South by Southwest makes sense. That's McConaughey territory.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, the way you're describing it kind of sounds how like I felt about Spring Breakers. Like, just wasn't enough there to justify like the runtime and the pacing, and just like, I don't know. I mean, you could tell there's some stuff he wanted to say, but it wasn't interesting enough to justify me watching it. So I don't know. This guy, Harmony Korine, is a filmmaker that I've always wished I liked more than I do.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those things. Everybody else, or not everybody, but there's a lot of people that I respect that really like his films, and I feel like I'm missing out on something, or I'm like missing something from these films, and I just can't put my finger on it,
Yeah. Thinking about it, I don't think I've ever seen a Harmony Korine film. As much as I'm aware of him and aware of most of his films, I have not seen a one. Yeah, checking right now. Not one of them. So I don't have an opinion on him. I don't know. I guess his stuff has never quite grabbed me or made me go out of my way to see.
I mean, he's a very divisive guy. He's one of those, I think, filmmakers who doesn't care if you like him.
Yeah.
And his films are never exactly big blockbusters,
Yeah,
I think
they're
Spring Breakers
always niche. Like, I think you said it best when saying like novelty. They all kind of feel like that a little bit.
Yeah. And even Spring Breakers, I think, was his biggest hit, but that was, I don't think that made a ton of money or anything.
Right. No, I don't think
Probably
so.
not.
So, yeah, so the other movie I watched was Dumbo.
Ooh.
Yeah.
Yikes.
Yikes.
We almost reviewed that one.
Yeah. I'm glad we didn't review it. I went and watched it anyways because I was curious to see what it was. And I feel like this movie has a lot of problems. And I think the main one is that the energy in this film, all the actors feel like they're at a 5. Like, it's very low energy. And there's a lot of great actors in here. I do think early on, Danny DeVito is pretty good and actually gives you a really good idea. We talked about Princess Bride and how Danny DeVito is almost cast as Vizzini in Princess Bride. And so there's a moment where I was like, this is what Danny DeVito would have been like if he had played Vizzini in Princess Bride. So that was interesting. That's a plus for this movie. One of the only ones.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it made you think about what another movie would have been like with him in it.
Oh, yeah, with Danny DeVito in it. And the lead young girl is sad because her mother has passed away, and I think she's kind of the one that saps the energy in the film. And I'm not putting it at her feet. I think it's the director's fault or the writers, or it's not necessarily her fault. She could be a great actress, but like she just plays this one note. Everything she does is sad, and it kind of just saps the energy from this movie. There's one part where the ringleader is like announcing Dumbo, and it doesn't feel like he's very excited, so it just feels like this whole movie is at a 5 when it should be at, there should at least be variances and go up to an 8 and back to the 5, like as far as energy is concerned. Right. The other problem I have is, Dumbo actually looks really good in this film. I think Dumbo himself as a character looks good, but Tim Burton kind of does the prequel Star Wars thing where he puts in like matte paintings in the back, like the sky is not what they actually filmed, and so they're obviously in front of a green screen doing all this, and they never look like they're in that place. They don't look like they inhabit this world.
That's a bummer. I was about to say that's a big problem I have with most of the things Tim Burton has been making since the 90s.
Yeah, agreed. Because it is big fantastical worlds, but it looks like the characters don't really fit in these worlds.
Right. Like it always looks bad. Like what's that movie that came out? It wasn't directed by Tim Burton, but it looked like it might as well have been. A Wrinkle in Time.
Oh, yeah.
The one directed by like Ava DuVernay.
Ava DuVernay, yeah.
Yeah, like if you look at the trailer for that movie, it looks like they're in like just nowhere. They're like in a place that doesn't exist, and like they look like they're in a cartoon, you know, and like in front of a green screen. That's how like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory looked. That's how
Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah, there you go. Especially Alice in Wonderland looked.
Yeah.
So that is super disappointing to hear.
Like I would say that even Tim Burton's like eccentricities, you know, like his weirdness and set design and costumes doesn't even show through, and that's some of the more interesting thing. Even if you don't like his movies, oftentimes the set design and the costumes are really interesting, but it's not here. And the one spot that I thought that Tim Burton would go crazy is the Elephants on Parade sequence.
I was about to ask you, is there a modern day getting drunk and seeing pink elephants?
They do not get drunk. The Elephants on Parade is like, Dumbo's about to go on go fly, and the performance before he goes is they're blowing bubbles essentially, and they look like elephants, and it's not that good. It's pretty awful, in fact.
Well, let me ask you this.
Okay.
Is it better or worse than the cartoon? Which is, in my opinion, not a good movie.
The cartoon?
Yeah, I don't know when the last time you saw Dumbo is, but it's not the strongest source material to base a modern-day movie on.
That may be. I know that the cartoon is very problematic through our lens of today.
Like the crows. Yeah.
Yeah.
Did they do anything with that sort of thing?
No, they avoided all that. I remember liking the cartoon. It has been a while since I've watched it. I don't. So this is better in the way that through our 2019 lens, there's not as many racial stereotypes than there is in the original Dumbo, and in that way, it's better. But as a film, it's worse.
Let me ask you this: I heard that the famous boxing announcer is in this film, and he actually announces Dumbo by saying, "Let's get ready to Dumbo," instead of "Let's get ready to rumble." Does that actually happen?
Yes. And it's unfortunate.
That's so bad. It sounds so bad in my head.
It is. But it wasn't actually, that was what I was talking about when the announcer didn't have very much energy. Like, he didn't sound excited to be announcing these things. Like, that was the one part where he actually had a little bit more energy. Like, let's get ready to Dumbo. And then, but everything else that he did was like, you know, at a 5 or a 4 of energy. And it just...
Man, that sounds really stupid.
It is. The let's get ready to Dumbo is really stupid.
Yeah. I heard Michael Keaton is very Trump-esque in this movie. Is that true? And is it saying anything?
No. I think that the closest thing it's saying, or what I actually read this online. I don't remember where, so I can't credit it. But it was not me that came up with this. It actually compared Michael Keaton more to Disney, because Michael Keaton's character goes around buying circuses and just acquiring a bunch of different circuses and putting on and bringing him into his big circus. So much like Disney, you know, they go around acquiring everything, and so I thought that was interesting. But I don't think it was meant to be saying anything. You know, like. I don't think.
I doubt Disney would. That's why it surprised me whenever I heard that. But I doubt Disney would say anything.
I mean, he could have
statement like that.
Yeah, he could have based his character on Trump. I did not get that from it, but he doesn't. He seems smarter than Trump, to be honest.
Yeah, maybe it's just like rich, powerful white person. It's very easy to go like, oh, is that Trump? I don't know.
Yeah, maybe
evil,
so.
Rich white person.
Because that happened to me when we saw Fallen Kingdom last summer. There was like the rich, powerful white people.
Oh, yeah, but one of those characters actually was like a direct jab at Trump.
Yeah, I think it was the Toby Jones character, right?
Yeah, it was the Toby Jones character.
Yeah. So it sounds like you're saying this is definitely not a return to form for Tim Burton.
No, and I don't know where I read this either, but I remember seeing headlines that it was. And there are some of my friends on Letterboxd gave it 4 stars.
Was it on Disney.com?
Yeah, it was on DisneyAllTheTime.com. I don't recommend it at all. Like, I don't even recommend watching it at home. There are so many other great kids movies, like Toy Story 4 will be out here pretty soon. I guess I can't necessarily vouch for that, but I can't imagine it being this bad.
Yeah. And there's at least 3 good Toy Story movies you can go see.
Yeah, absolutely. Stay home. Oftentimes I won't recommend staying home, but in this situation, just stay home.
Yeah, maybe stop encouraging Disney to remake these old cartoons that don't need to be remade because they're fine the way they are.
The other one I'm really not looking forward to is Aladdin. I saw the trailer for that, and that doesn't look very good at all.
I'm not looking forward to any of them. Aladdin, Lion King, anything else that's like down the road that's another one of these. I'm
more curious about Aladdin than I am Lion King. I figure like Lion King will just be like the Jungle Book, but the Lion King, But
yeah,
like the live action or quote live action one. But I think Aladdin is the one that like they can't remake Aladdin the way they did in the cartoon because Will Smith is nothing like Robin Williams. Like so they got to do a reimagining of some sort, right?
It'll be, I imagine, more Will Smith's personality as the genie as opposed to... it'll actually be Will Smith as Hitch, I bet. Hooking up the princess and...
Aladdin, I'm hoping it has like this fun Bollywood type feel to it when it comes out, but that might be hoping for too much.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's weird. That's I think the best way I can describe it, how I feel about it, is like it just looks weird and it just seems weird. And
yeah, I agree.
I hope know it's that good. I can see a way that they do this in a way that's just like fully enjoyable.
Well, even though like they're not like it's not as much of a cartoon parading as live action as like Jungle Book, it doesn't feel like real live action. It feels like a weird hybrid cartoon land because like they're remaking or trying to remake in live action what was intended to be animated, but they're keeping the same visuals,
Right.
And so you have this result of like this very colorful, weird looking movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. Isn't Guy Ritchie doing it?
Yeah. Which also gives me pause.
Indeed. That guy is a real hit or miss.
Yeah. Huh? He's kind of a lot like Tim Burton, in fact, because I
think he has more hits than Tim Burton, to be honest with you.
That may be, yeah. But I like his first couple of movies a lot, and then he just kind of faded away.
Oh, he did. He did a good movie. What was it with Henry Cavill? Man from U.N.C.L.E.
Oh yeah.
I hear that's
that
good.
was decent. Yeah,
that was a fun movie.
Well, we'll see, I guess, on all of these Disney movies, except I won't see Dumbo.
Yeah, please don't. In fact, I almost walked out. I don't want to, and I don't often even think about that. But I thought about it during this film.
Cool.
Yeah, I wish there was a way that I could go see these movies because I'm curious about them and I want to watch them so I can talk about them,
Yeah.
But I wish there was a way I could do it without giving money. I don't want to vote with my money when I watch these movies.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll sneak into Aladdin and watch it that way.
Just cross your arms at the door and peek through the little crack in the door.
Yeah.
Just buy a ticket for something else and walk into Aladdin.
There you go.
Oh, that's a great idea. I could buy perfect, Justin. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
So, is there anything else on our minds, guys?
No, I'm totally exhausted of everything that's been on my mind.
Yeah, not a thing. Okay.
It's like confession.
All right. So, with that, I guess it's time to move into our review of Dragged Across Concrete.
You're losing perspective and compassion. There's a reason I'm sitting behind this desk running things, and you're out there with a partner that's 20 years younger than you.
Hey, Anthony's got a mouth with his own engine, but he's solid.
I'm thinking about the kind of future I can offer my girlfriend.
Pops is a yesterday who ain't worth words.
Good heavens and praise be to him. Your absence was a weight upon us.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonton.
I don't like doing things with so many question marks everywhere.
There's a lot of imbeciles out there.
This is a bad idea.
It's all cotton candy.
we have the skills and the right to acquire proper compensation.
All right, so as always, before we get into Dragged Across Concrete, just wanted to let you know that at first we'll be doing a spoiler-free segment where we won't give any spoilers about the film, just our general impressions, and then we'll give you a spoiler alert and a bumper before we move into spoilers so that if you haven't seen the film yet, you can then pause the podcast, go see the film, then come back and finish the podcast.
All right, so Dragged Across Concrete was directed by S. Craig Zahler, and it's starring Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn. The IMDb synopsis says, once two overzealous cops get suspended from the force, they must delve into the criminal underworld to get their proper compensation.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I think I read, or maybe they changed it on IMDb, but it used to read two racist cops is the one I read, and that's the only difference in the setup. Two racist cops. Anyways.
Well, I think that's a better description.
Yeah.
Maybe they didn't want to, tip their hats
Yeah.
a little too early. Yeah. I guess that would turn people off too, for sure.
Yeah.
It would turn every Blue Lives Matter person off, probably.
Yeah, probably so. Yeah, that's
that.
true.
That's a pretty big segment of people.
And that might be the people that you might want to appeal to for a movie like this as well.
Right. That's what I was about to say. That's their base.
I guess I'll go first unless one of you guys wanted to kick it off.
No, please.
No,
go ahead.
Excited to see what you have to say.
Okay. This is a movie that was on my radar because of the director, S. Craig Zahler. I have seen his two previous films before this, which are Bone Tomahawk and Brawl in Cell Block 99. And I think both of them are, while maybe not good in the classic sense, both are unique and enjoyable in their own Craig Zahler kind of way. So when this movie came out, I was expecting the movie to be like his two previous films, like a genre movie that is violent, probably nihilistic, and very retro, and shamelessly campy. And that is exactly what we got for the most part, I think. Like we mentioned earlier, it is about a grizzled old detective who is racist, so it could be hard to sell to a lot of people, because it's not really a character that you are rooting for at any point in the movie. And actually, when you take a step back, I think there are maybe only two likable people in the whole film that come to mind off the top of my head. And they spend large sections of the movie not being shown. And one of those people I mentioned is actually barely in the movie.
I'd be interested to know the two.
Yeah, well, I mean, maybe more than two,
right
but
off.
two come to mind, whatever. 2, 3, whatever. But I think the strong element of the movie is the cast, or the strongest element of the movie. I think Mel Gibson and Vince Vaughn work well off of one another. But that said, I also think the movie is probably a little too close to home for someone like Mel Gibson to be cast.
Right. You can't help but think about the real life happenings of Mel Gibson. I think they actually almost call them out very explicitly, at least one of his happenings.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that may be why it works in the role. I don't know. But I can see large sections of people just being turned off by that right away. If you ask me, I think Troy Kittles is probably the best performance in the movie. And so anyway, this is a movie I enjoyed because it's unique and odd, just like his other movie. I think it's better than his other movies, in my opinion. However, that said, it's very long, and I'm not that enthusiastic about it. And I don't know that there are many people that I would feel comfortable, well, not comfortable, but not many people I would feel confident in recommending it to. Because it's not like I've seen more offensive movies, but it's such a unique, odd, throwback retro movie that I can't think of many people who would seek it out or really truly enjoy it,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think, Chris?
Yeah. I was very curious about this movie. This is my first introduction to S. Craig Zahler. I haven't seen the other two. I am curious to see them. I've heard good things about both of them as they were coming out.
Well, they're very much in line with this. The tone and the campiness and the oddness, but in the very dark, violent tone.
Right. And that's kind of where it is. It's kind of splits people. People really like it or people don't.
He's like a serious Robert Rodriguez.
Yeah. But this is much better than a Robert Rodriguez
I
film.
agree.
That's not saying much, I don't think. But yeah, I was very curious about this film, and I thought the casting was, and we're probably going to talk about this more later, but the casting was pretty either ingenious casting Mel Gibson in this film, or it's going to blow up in everybody's faces. You know, like, so it's one of those risky moves, you know, like I think, and I don't think it blew up in everybody's faces. But yeah, and like you were saying, Mike, this is a big movie, big sprawling 2.5 hour long movie, and what I do like about it being 2.5 hours long is that it kind of, to varying degrees of success, it takes its time with the characters.
Agreed. Yeah.
And it is to varying degrees of success, because sometimes it really works well, and then sometimes it doesn't. But ultimately, I appreciate it, even if it's not working out real well. I appreciate them taking their time. And I think that at the end of the movie, you know who these people are. And I do think that there's a little bit more character to some of these guys than if they had have rushed through it at 2 hours or an hour and a half type length of a film. Because a film like this could be an hour and a half. You just cut out a lot.
Yeah,
of
you could
extra
make
stuff.
this a very tight movie that could probably go in theaters and make some money.
Yeah. The other thing I really enjoyed about this film was the dialogue. I like the way that Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson talk to each other, or even Troy Kittles. He tells his mom, "Pops is yesterday's news, so let's leave it in yesterday," or something like that. That's just this really, like, reminds me a lot of Brick, that kind of noir talk, you know, that you kind of have to really pay attention to. They're not speaking another language, but you have to pay attention like they are. It's like Shakespeare almost, because you have to kind of
get on its
what
wavelength.
they're talking about. Yeah, exactly. And once you're on the wavelength, everything's good. But it's really enjoyable to listen to. Yeah, I think ultimately this is a film that's like a big shaggy dog, and it's dirty and it's unkempt, and you don't really mind hanging out with it that long, but you're not sad when its owners show up to come pick it up. You know, it's just this big unruly dog, you know, mangy, shaggy, and but that's not necessarily the worst thing in the world. So,
do you also mean shaggy in the sense that it could use a trim?
Yeah, maybe, but I don't know that I'd want to.
Yeah, I found a certain satisfaction when it was over, that I was like, I did it. That was epic.
Yeah. And I wasn't necessarily ever bored with the film. It's not necessarily boring, and maybe one of you guys found it boring, but like, it is long. You know, like I did take a break in the middle of it because I was watching it at home. So like I took a potty break in the middle. You know, like I went to the restroom, got some food, and then went back to it. You know, but like I was never necessarily bored.
Yeah. We haven't said how long it is. It is 2 hours and 40 minutes. Just
it's
so
40
people
minutes?
have a frame of reference.
Yeah, it's pretty
Chris
long.
undersold it with that 2.5 hours earlier.
Yeah.
That's like 22-ish minutes shorter than in Avengers Endgame is going to be.
Yeah. I will say, so Beach Bum and this movie feel like they're the same length.
That doesn't speak well to Beach Bum.
No.
So Justin, what are your thoughts, man?
Well, like Chris, this is my first introduction to S. Craig Zahler. This is my first film of his. I wanted to see Bone Tomahawk and what is the other film? Brawl in Cell Block 99. Yeah, I wanted to see that one, and I just haven't.
He's got a knack for titles. I'll give him that.
Yeah, for
sure. Yeah,
all three of those titles
true.
are badass.
Yeah, I will give him that for sure. So when we talked about doing the film, I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll watch it. And I did not know that it was 2 hours and 40 minutes.
I know. I remember you put that in the Slack and you were like, whoa, I wasn't prepared for this.
I know.
Yeah, it was like 11 o'clock at night.
Exactly. Yeah, I started it late and I had work in the morning, but I was like, I'll just watch this movie real quick. And it turns out it was, almost 3 hours. And I was like, oh no, what have I done? I'm already a little sleepy. So
and that was like the only chance he had to watch it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, exactly. But so basically I was off to a bad start with the film, and I say all of that to basically say this is my overall thought as soon as the movie was over, was that I was never bored and I was fully engrossed and into it. The 2 hours and 40 minutes, considering how slow paced the movie is at times, pretty much flew by for me. I didn't have any issues finishing it. I was tired the next morning for sure. when I went to work, but I did not have any issues finishing it or staying awake or like checking the clock. So I will give it that it is entertaining and that it keeps your attention. I think that the more I get from having watched the film and the more I look back on it, I like it less and less, which is never moving into like a territory where I think I don't like it. I just struggle to remember anything super fondly or get like really excited thinking about something from this film. I think that a lot of what you guys have said is true. I would agree with most of it. The one thing that I'd want to point out that I found really interesting, and I'm not even sure that I liked it, but as you guys have said, that this film is very campy, and I think it's written very campy, and or at least some of the violence is handled in a very campy way, but it is treated 110% serious. Nobody's winking at the camera, and that ends up with varying degrees of success for me. Like, I appreciate the attempt to write a campy movie and then treat it totally serious. That's interesting, but there are times when that did not work for me, and some of it is the dialogue. Some of it is the performances, performing this kind of like campy dialogue that seems bad at times, and that's kind of some of the things that turned me off about the film. The other thing is that I feel like this movie would be a very successful movie maybe like 20 years ago, but as it stands, like I feel like this movie didn't offer a whole lot new to me. Like it didn't offer a whole lot of things that I haven't seen before, and that's something that I think I have to hold against the film personally, is that I don't feel like I had any sort of new cinema experience. And I'm open to hearing arguments of why it is something different. So, but that's where I come down. Like, I think ultimately it's a good film, but it gets less and less interesting and less, I don't want to say less good, but you know, I remember it less and less fondly as I look back on it.
I can see that, and I don't know that I disagree with you on that.
I mean, sure. I will say that I think the movie may not offer much to chew on in the way of new things like you're mentioning, but I do feel like it is unique. The overall tone and vibe of it is unique. All of this guy's movies feel like this, and they don't feel like anything else. I agree that it feels like 20 years like at a time, or maybe even longer, but that also, in a sense, is kind of refreshing. You know, like it's nice to see gray characters. That was really big in the 90s, you know, like especially in the indie movement. This feels like it could have been like a Killing Zoe type movie from the 90s, or like a what's that crazy ass movie with Gary Oldman where he plays like the hitman? Romeo's Bleeding?
Is Bleeding, yeah. And that's where my 20 years number, I think, comes from, is that it feels almost like a 90s movie.
Like a 90s, like violent, super violent movie.
Yeah, hyper-violence, for sure.
Like a much better Boondock Saints.
Oh, God, yeah, much better.
But yeah, it's better than Boondock Saints.
Yeah, in the sense that it's good.
Yeah.
At all.
Right.
I think, though, like this guy, like, same thing in, like, Cell Block, or Brawl on Cell Block 99, like, the soundtrack is unique. Like, you feel like the songs were written for the movie, and they're like this weird, jazzy universe where, like, it's like in the 70s, but not. I see what you're saying, because, like you said, they never play it for camp. Like, it's always treated 100% serious. But at the same time, I find it charming the same way I find bad horror charming.
Okay.
You know what I mean? It's a genre movie. I like, you know, hyper-violent 90s indie flicks like that, you know? There's a place for those kinds of things. Like, I may not be crazy about them, and they're not going to make my top 50 movies of the decade or anything.
Yeah.
But there is a place for well-made genre trash, I think.
Sure.
Like a pulpy novel, like...
Yeah, like just
very pulpy.
Yeah, like the movie sets you up in the title, Dragged Across Concrete. That's such like a pulpy genre title, you know?
Yeah, everything is pulpy and genre and campy about it except for the tone, which is, I don't know, what throws me off.
But I disagree. I think the tone is very campy and very genre-y.
It's very genre-y. I don't know, like, campy in the way that the characters, like, wink at the camera, like Justin was saying earlier. I don't think it does that.
No, not like that, but I think it's campy, like, you know how you see, like, slasher films in the 80s and the 90s, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes they want to do nothing more than just make a specific type of thing for a specific type of function.
Right.
And there are some that are made badly, and there are some that are made well, and then there's some that are made, like, aware, you know? And I agree that it's not winking at you like Eli Roth, but it feels like it's aware of what it's trying to achieve. I don't know. But I think what you're describing kind of encapsulates this director's entire, like, the debate going on around him. Like, if you look at IMDb, all three of his movies are like 7.1, 7.1, and 7.2.
Right.
Right? So they're very much all riding on that same line of, like, this is good, but something is weird about it. And that's kind of why I compared it to Robert Rodriguez earlier. Mm-hmm. Which is like, a lot of Robert Rodriguez's movies are technically really good, but something feels a little incomplete or off about them. And I kind of feel the same way about this guy. Only I like this guy better than anything Robert Rodriguez has done recently.
Right.
Yeah, and it feels complete to me. Like, I feel like he's nailing the tone that he's going for. To me, I think he's just intentionally going for something opposite of every other decision that's being made, and I think it's all intentional. Like, it feels solid. It doesn't feel like it's making any mistakes. Like, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's a misstep. It has these moments where, like, that serious tone highlights some of the campiness in other places that feel bad or feel
I know what you mean,
lame, but you know, I don't know, it's not quite lame. It's a very weird thing, and that's something that I guess that's a big struggle that I've had with it.
I agreed. I felt that way primarily about Brawl in Cell Block 99.
Okay.
Yeah, like, Bone Tomahawk is like a straightforward, like, horror western movie. And so there's a certain amount of campiness involved a lot in that one. But there's also Kurt Russell leading it, who can, you know, lead anything. And
he's kind of the king of campy, too.
Yeah, exactly. He's right at home in there. So maybe I think Kurt Russell in there kind of makes it feel a little more at home. But Brawl in Cell Block 99 is very much like a long, almost like, I think, 2.5 hour movie like this one. And it's about brawling in prison, right? It's about fighting. And so you can imagine this style of violence applied to a movie like that.
Yeah.
Because there's all kinds of, like, mixed signals in that movie, because it's like campy violence, but everyone is, like, not winking at the camera. They're like 100% serious, you know? And they're like, characters are going through a lot of, like, emotions and drama. Same thing in this one. You know, like, we haven't really talked about it much, but Vince Vaughn's character, you know, he's engaged to a black woman, or he's dating a black woman. He wants to be engaged to a black woman, yet he's kind of a racist cop. That's pretty dark. Yeah, and, like, much darker than it needed to be. They could have made his character much less interesting, you know?
Yeah. I mean, I never got the vibe that he was super racist, but I might not be remembering something correctly.
Well, I mean, that's the thing is, I think they leave his character gray enough to where you're not sure, but he's loyal to his racist partner, right? And Mel Gibson does some pretty atrocious things, especially to a woman that they bust in on in her apartment.
Yeah.
Like, pretty early in the movie, and I think there's some pretty racist dialogue flying from both of them there.
Yeah,
probably so.
I think it's a passive racism that they both have. They're not actively going out and shouting slurs at black people because they hate them, or, you know, Latinos or whatever. But they have a passive racism that's under the surface. You know.
Lots of people do in this movie. Really, I think that's a big thing of what this movie is about.
Yeah, I'd actually like to know the second. There's one person I think of right off the top of my head, but what's the second person that you actually like in this film?
Without spoiling anything, a Jennifer Carpenter's character.
Okay, that's the one that I was thinking of.
Yeah, Troy Kittles and Jennifer Carpenter's characters are my favorite two characters in the movie.
Wait, Troy Kittles was the like the guy that gets out of prison at the very beginning.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, he's like the main character that's not Vince Vaughn and Mel Gibson.
Yeah, but I think Troy Kittles is. I'm not on his side. I don't think.
We could talk about it more in spoilers, but I am more on his side than I am.
Okay, agreed. I'll agree that
our protagonists.
Yeah. We can talk about Jennifer Carpenter more in spoilers too, because I will want to disagree essentially because everything involving her character is one of the things that I did not like about the movie, like that I straight up didn't like.
Okay, we'll have to.
But we can get there.
I want to talk about that in spoilers,
for sure.
Makes sense. I understand that. I liked it after that whole segment was done, and then I was like, oh, okay. In retrospect, I liked it.
Right.
So, I was wondering what you guys thought about the Don Johnson scene. Justin, you kind of brought it up a little bit earlier in our talk. It looks like with Mel Gibson, and they're being called out because they did not go by the book in how they arrested somebody, and they got caught on camera. Somebody videotaped them being rough with criminals in ways that they probably shouldn't have been. I don't know that I particularly like the scene in general, just as the way it fit into the film. I didn't think Don Johnson was super great in this film. But I wanted to know what you guys thought, because basically Don Johnson's character says something along the lines, like, you can get caught saying something on a private phone call and get in trouble for it. Which basically... This is, I think, the winkiest it gets, because Mel Gibson, did get in trouble for something that happened on a private conversation. And they're kind of calling that out in this scene. And I was wondering how you guys feel about this. I think I'm mixed on this, because I do think that people deserve forgiveness, or I obviously don't agree with anything that Mel Gibson said at that time, but I do think at some point... as long as they're apologetic and, see the wrongs. And it's hard to do that with celebrities because we don't know exactly what they want or say, but that we should forgive them and move on from it at some point. But this scene actually made me feel like, oh, if you get caught on the phone, that's an invasion of your privacy. Well, it almost felt like it was excusing Mel Gibson's behavior when he did get caught on the phone. And it felt a little icky to me. What did you guys think?
I mean, yeah, I see what you're saying. I think Mel Gibson got in trouble for more than just, leaked phone calls, though. So my mind didn't go there directly, like, oh, they're talking about Mel Gibson himself. I mean, I definitely think of him as, very similar to this character, just in, my impression of what I imagine Mel Gibson to be like, And maybe that's not fair, but, that's the impression he's given me in my lifetime,
Mm-hmm.
Is that he's a kind of a gruff, racist old man. And
accidentally given you, right? He got caught.
Yeah, exactly. The character himself reminds me of that. The conversation didn't make me think of Mel Gibson too much, but I do remember, and I agree with you, by the way, on Don Johnson's performance. Maybe that's part of the dialogue as well.
Mm-hmm.
But what they're saying there, I think it's interesting because I don't know if the movie's implying that cops shouldn't be under surveillance, because I think it's a good thing that cops are under a very watchful eye these days,
right.
Especially to prevent behavior like this. I don't know if the movie shares that same point of view, though.
Yeah.
Well, I struggle to understand why they would bring that up so specifically.
Yes.
It feels like a wink to the camera, but also in the scene, they're kind of lamenting this world where cell phones exist and they can be filmed and they can't live their lives the way they could before, and that even their personal phone calls are subject to being made public and bringing them down in the eyes of the public. They seem to be lamenting it in the scene, right? But they don't seem to have any remorse about those things. So maybe the point is that they're an old breed and they don't know how to live outside of that world.
I was about to say, I think part of the point is you have to look at who these two characters are. These aren't necessarily the characters that we want speaking for us. These are characters that we're not really supposed to be that into,
Right. And I can't help but read Mel Gibson's character, Mel Gibson the actor, into this film, as a wink. So, and maybe that's me doing too much here, but because it's such a specific thing, it makes me think that either Mel Gibson is unremorseful for he's like, I got caught, and stuff and my career got ruined essentially. And I'm remorseful that I got caught, as opposed to I'm remorseful that I said that. And that's the issue I have with the scene and with, I guess, Mel Gibson, the actor himself, because I don't know what exactly he's trying to say. I don't think
he's trying to say anything. He's just the actor. He didn't write it.
Yeah.
But I mean, like, as the actor, I would be like, maybe this isn't a great idea for me to be in this scene. You know, like,
well, his character, I mean, maybe that's the journey his character goes on. He's, well, we can't talk about it in spoilers, but I think his character's actions propel, and like the way he is propels what happens, you know?
Yeah. Ultimately, and
so what you're doing, what you're basically saying is like, you're taking the very first part of the movie before character work happens and before like points are made and like the full picture.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for me, that one scene is problematic, you know, like, and I enjoy the rest of the movie, like we talked about. I just, I'm not quite sure how I feel about that scene, and, you know, whether Mel Gibson is, you know, what's trying to being said there, you know, like, either for Mel Gibson, the actor, the person, or the character, you know, like, and I'm not.
Well, it's all character work. Everything's character work. Every scene in this movie is character work. You hear them complain about things that we don't agree with.
Right.
You hear them say things we don't agree with. But it's always from their perspective, unapologetically. The movie never really cares if you like them or not. Like, there is a very frank conversation about race and living in a neighborhood where you are a minority, you know? There's a lot of blunt talk in there where you're like, man, they're really laying it out there. But at the same time, these are these characters who live in this place, and that's what they think, you know?
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, you know, for everything probably but this scene, because there's too much to it.
Well, let's move on from this scene.
Yeah. Sorry.
So, does anybody have anything else before we move into spoilers? I think I'm all out of general stuff. It sounds like we all recommend it.
Yeah, recommend it, but I don't know who to.
It's an interesting film.
Yeah, and like I said, you know, it's very entertaining for a 2-hour and 40-minute movie late at night. Kept me totally engrossed and interested. So, you know, how bad can a film be? Not very for doing that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Let's move into spoilers.
Let's go.
No, I guess Rosebud is just a piece in a jigsaw puzzle.
I'll tell you what. Give me one cigarettes you got up there. I'll tell you all about it.
And here we go.
So, I guess we'll get right into something I mentioned earlier, but couldn't go too deep into, but I think the overall theme that I get from this movie is the different ways that not outright racism, I guess, what did you call it, Chris? Passive racism?
Yeah.
And underlying racism can sort of rear its head. I don't know, that's a lot of what I got out of the film in terms of themes and stuff. What do you guys think?
Well, yeah, I mean, like, Mel Gibson and Troy Kittles. Yeah, Troy Kittles' character, I can't remember what his character's name is, like Henry or something?
Henry, yes, you are correct.
Yeah, okay. So they are both pretty much fighting for very similar reasons.
Yeah.
Right, they're both trying to take care of their family.
Yeah, they both are good men in their own eyes who are looking out for their family, doing some shady stuff to do it, but they both very much think they have it under control and they think they deserve more, you know? And they are fighting for the exact same reasons. They're the last two left standing. And I don't know, because of their situations and their unique perspectives that they live in, there is no way one of them wasn't going to die walking away from that scene, which is a shame, I think, because neither one of them needed to.
Right.
Yeah, that's where, you know, the main theme comes in, I think, is because they both could have gotten away with what I assume is plenty of money for each of them to share and split. Even what was their split, 60-40? I'm not sure who was getting 40 and who was getting 60, but I don't think it matters. But it seemed like plenty of money, and they both could have just gotten away with it. But that lack of trust for the other person, you know, from a black man to a white cop, or a old kind of racist white man to a black man, like, that trust is ultimately their downfall, or the downfall of Mel Gibson anyways.
And ultimately for Troy Kittles as well, for like his soul, I guess, you know, like he seemed pretty bummed that Mel Gibson made him do that.
Yeah. that was very genuine. Like, why did you?
Yeah, he's like,
I
man, why'd you
wasn't
do
gonna
that?
anything, yeah.
Yeah, were you being honest about your family?
But at the same time, you cannot blame Mel Gibson for being like, you got to get rid of that video where he shot that lady in the face.
Yeah,
totally.
And what he was trying to say, I mean, yeah, the arguments that they were making at the end make complete sense. He's like, look, you get rid of that video, I can turn you in, you can turn me in, we're even. You know, like, but that video, I just get arrested and I can't implicate you, you know, type of thing.
Yeah, exactly. So the ending was set up pretty well. You know, you understand, like, and you understand why Mel Gibson feels the way he does. You really do, because like you don't agree with it, but you've spent 2.5 hours with this guy and the world he lives in and the way he views the world. You just completely understand like what he's up against, and you just watch his own villainy and his own decisions just continue to just, you know, propel him towards that end, you know?
Right.
And I think we can also talk about Jennifer Carpenter, because we mentioned that earlier.
Yeah, when that was going on initially, like, I was like, why is this scene so long? You know, like, the scene outside the door, and her getting on the bus and everything, and I was like, this is not working for me. But then when it was all, like, done, and the way she goes out, and so quickly, I was like, it genuinely surprised me. Like, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
You know, and, like, the violent way in which it happens and everything, it's just, like, I found it all to be kind of outrageous in, like, a fun way. Like, a surprising, shocking way, you know?
This is one of the moments where I was glad that we got to spend time with a specific character that could have been trimmed down. You know, this is one of the scenes that would have been cut in the 90-minute version of this film. But I liked spending that time with her, and then you're right, when she does get killed in such a violent way, it's completely unexpected.
Yeah, like, it's not worth it until the payoff.
Yes, yeah. But I think, Justin, you are a negative on this moment, so I'll let you explain that. Explain yourself, sir.
Well, I mean, it's kind of the opposite of everything you guys are saying for me, is that, like, it did feel like a waste of time to me, and I didn't enjoy that we spent so much time with her, and she only came about right before the scene where she gets killed. It felt sort of cheap and manipulative to me. Like, it's like where you see like a war movie and one of the soldiers has a baby back home.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, well, that one's going to die. Right? And it just felt a little too textbook, a little bit too standard. And I appreciate that they cast Jennifer Carpenter in this to make it seem like a very important character and maybe try and shock you with the death. But ultimately, for me, it felt more like a cheap ploy than a satisfying shock.
Well, I mean, I see what you're saying, but that's like the opposite. That's like, I want more of this kind of thing in movies. Like, I remember one time when we saw Live Free or Die Hard, all three of us.
Ugh.
And I remember, Chris, when we were leaving, you were like, I want to see the movie where, like, the guy gets up, goes to work, as a job as a henchman, and then gets killed by John McClane real quick.
Yeah, that's
as
the
soon as
very
he busts
end
out
of
of
the
an
movie.
elevator or something like that, you know?
Right.
That's what this reminds me of. It's not quite a henchman in an action film, but it's like the soulless victim that, like, we see so many times in movies that's just a random extra.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden we spend time, and you're wondering, like, why are we spending time with this character? Okay, I guess she's going to be a new character introduced really late in the game, and then the bad guys start talking to her, and you're like, okay, she's going to be the hostage, you know, and then our heroes are going to interact with her somehow. And then to pull the rug out from under you like that, I can see how it could feel manipulative, but to me, it strikes me as, I don't want to say bold, but it's like
unique.
Chris said earlier, it treats every character with respect. Like, everyone gets a backstory, you know?
But, you know, and honestly, while I enjoyed it and I disagree with what Justin's saying, I can understand why you could come to that conclusion in this film. Because you're
definitely.
right. It is a deviation in the story. It's not, you know, it's like screenwriting 101 is, you know, you don't do something like that. That's kind of why I find it unique and pleasurable to watch. But I can also see why you'd come across like, why did we go through that? It doesn't make any sense. It's a complete diversion. And, you know, it's manipulative. So yeah. I can kind of, I understand your point there, but I don't necessarily agree with it, but I can see where you're coming from.
Yeah, I agree. And it's like the same thing with Don Johnson's character. Like, the scene doesn't entirely work, but in that scene with Don Johnson and Mel Gibson sitting there talking, we get so much backstory about Mel Gibson and so much backstory about Don Johnson. Like, he's in one scene, I think, and we already know he used to be his partner.
Right.
He was also a little racist. He's concerned with Mel Gibson's behavior over the past few years. He was more ambitious.
That's where we get the title of the film.
Everything's just so rich and to varying degrees of success. It may mess with the pacing sometimes, but for the most part, I did enjoy those little tangents.
Yeah, I forget. I don't know. I should really start writing these things down when I see them. But online, I saw like a YouTube video or an article where it compared this to a book. Like, so you start the new chapter, you're in somebody else's new perspective or point of view, and you spend some time with them, before you get to the main plot. Like sometimes books will do that, and it's kind of where they compared it, and that actually makes sense to me about this movie, and that's why it's so long.
Yeah, I guess what I would say is that it's a matter of placement of that backstory that makes it feel manipulative to me, is that we don't bother getting to know this character or introducing her until right when, she's about to die. And I guess it's just like, you literally just made me sit through that, but it's not a huge deal. Like, right. It's not like I hate it. It's just, I don't know. It's just something that rubbed me the wrong way when I was watching it.
Did it shock you when she got shot?
No, not really. I expected her to die because of the baby.
I expected her to die, but very much further into the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair enough. What I will give her credit for is it seems a little bit like they were almost going to do a Fargo thing where you don't introduce like a main character until 30 minutes into the movie. Mm-hmm. And I appreciate that they are going for that shock, right? Like, I definitely appreciate it. I'm just not sure that it worked totally for me, but oh well. The other thing we kind of mentioned, Don Johnson saying the dragged across concrete thing, and that's another theme that I think is really important in the movie, is that there's lots of characters who I think in one way or another are not, their professions or their choices in life have led them down a path where they can't get to a comfortable place, and some of that is due to like not being compensated correctly for the job that you're doing, or getting out of prison and probably having limited options for work. And this is all, everything that happens in the movie, a result of that. So do you guys think that this movie is like saying something and like condemning that aspect of society?
Well, I think the movie is very much saying something with the dragged across concrete metaphor. I believe it was Don Johnson essentially telling Mel Gibson's character that, like, hey, you need to like balance out, like get some perspective. Like, you're losing perspective, on the job. Like, if you go out there every day looking for the worst in people, interacting with the worst of people, then that is like getting dragged across concrete. You're hardening yourself and getting an unfair, unbalanced perspective on people, right? Mm-hmm. And then I guess prison did the same thing to Henry, right? Like, and just systemic racism in general and how it treats minorities, especially ones out of prison. It feels like life beating them down a lot of times due to the choices they've made themselves, reinforces the worst in them instead of allowing them to like grow or change or anything like that. Like, does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. So would you think that the movie is actually trying to say something along the lines of, cops are undercompensated and people who go to prison, especially minority people who go to prison, can't really get out and have a lot of great options to turn their life around? Or the reason I ask, I guess, is if you feel that way is because the rest of the film is such a sort of genre camp piece and so focused on the violence and that sort of thing at times that I wonder if that's really, really important to the filmmaker.
I don't necessarily come away thinking that this movie is saying anything. I think it's a pulpy film, and I don't know that it's necessarily saying anything more than what we're getting from it, than what's surface level.
Right. Well, I think it is very pulpy, and I don't think he's trying to make a grander statement. I think the scene is probably more of an observation and a reasoning for why Mel Gibson's character is the way he is. Like why this guy would be racist. Not excusing it, but just saying, like, you stick to this job, underpaid, dealing with people that don't like you, usually minorities because of the beat that you work on. He gets an unfair look at them, right? Like, he's dealing with exclusively the bad.
Mm-hmm.
And he never, like, takes time off the job to balance out or gets off the street. That's what he was saying. He's like, you've been on the street so long.
It's shaping your perspective.
Yeah, it's shaping your perspective in an unhealthy way. Like, you didn't need to be so hard on that guy. You know, you didn't used to be that hard. Yeah, so I think I don't know if it's excusing it, but I think it's just making a statement like, hey, this is probably why cops are racist. You know what I mean? It's they work long hours with bad pay under stressful conditions, and it hardens them in the worst ways sometimes.
Did you guys ever, along that same phrase, did you ever get a Triple Frontier vibe out of this?
No, I didn't.
There's a moment where they're talking about how uncompensated there are, and I was like, oh, this is Triple Frontier.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of that same point that I thought maybe was going to be made, but I think in the end of the movie, I didn't feel that it was actually trying to sway your opinion or like get you on board with its message in any way.
Yeah, I think this movie deals a lot in tropes and stereotypes, just altogether.
Yeah.
I mean, like you were talking about emotional manipulation with the baby, and I think the second scene when Henry gets home, his mom is prostituting, hooking, and his brother is in, hooking and shooting heroin, and the money he left, she's spent all of it, right? And then his brother's in a wheelchair. Like, that's as tropey as you get,
Right.
And is probably emotionally manipulative as you get. But it's having fun delving in those tropes and those stereotypes. And you don't roll your eyes when you see it either. And I think that that's an interesting and commendable thing that this movie has done.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it wears its heart on its sleeve, I think.
Yeah.
Like, it very much feels like a VOD type movie. Like, there's no way this movie could ever be theatrical unless you trimmed like an hour out of it.
Actually, I do think it got a theatrical release, but a very limited theatrical release.
Right, yeah. What'd you guys think of the Vince Vaughn plotline when he checked his phone message at the end?
Yeah, talk about emotionally manipulative.
Yeah, it's like, not what I wanted to hear.
Yeah. I had a good time, I think, with this film, and I don't think Justin's wrong about the further away you get with it. Like it's kind of maybe fades away pretty quickly.
It's up and down, because I had the same feeling with Brawl and Cell Block 99, and the same thing with Bone Tomahawk. But like as time goes on, every time this guy puts out a new movie, I'm like, well, I got to see that one now.
Yeah, that's interesting.
So I'm not enthusiastic about any of his movies, but for some reason, I think I like them all so far. But I can't put my finger on why, because like Justin, I have tonal problems with all of them.
Yeah.
It feels like a movie when I see some sort of Taken-esque, like or what's the film that Jennifer Lawrence was in, like Red Sparrow, or one of those like sort of action thriller films that are kind of generic and bland. It's like I feel like when I see one of those, I'm going to remember Dragged Across Concrete more fondly in like that light.
Oh, that makes sense.
Yeah, there you go. That's perfect, I think. Like when you see like Taken, and then the tropes taking themselves so seriously, and then you watch like Dragged Across Concrete, where like a lot of equally tired tropes are taken seriously, but not in the same way.
But yeah, they're not hiding it.
Not in like this is badass kind of way.
Yeah, they're not necessarily hiding it. It's out in full view. Like what it is like, this is what we are. It's not winking at the camera and it's taking it serious, but like, look, the guy's brother is in a wheelchair and his mom is shooting heroin and is a prostitute. And it doesn't kind of really get any more in your face than that. But they don't hide it. It's not like I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, like you have characters like it's just like ultra manly in a lot of ways too. Like you have like Vince Vaughn being like, "Fuck it, my word is my bond," or something like that, or "My word is my." promise or something, or my obligation. That's what it is.
Yeah.
It's just like manly men being manly for honor in their own manly way, kind of Wild Bunch-esque, you know?
Or their own honor way, whatever that means.
Yeah, and I think we kind of have to talk about the whole end sequence after they leave the bank, up through like the, them pulling up outside that shed or warehouse thing or whatever, where they were going to change cars, and just that whole shootout sequence, which is a decent chunk of the film.
That last hour, I found to be very compelling.
Yeah, it's my favorite part. And I think that's where this movie really, really shines, is the pacing and tone of that whole scene, and just like the events and the way they unfold slowly and intentionally slow. I really, really enjoyed that.
Yeah, the standoff in the armored vehicle standoff, like where they're picking them off one by one, and that shootout, and everyone's always switching positions and trying new strategies to like shoot the other one.
Yeah, and the tables turn. Like one guy, at some point the van is in the higher position, like it is, or is controlling the situation, and then it changes. Yeah, that sequence is really good.
Yeah, the way the hostage the way the hostage scene played out, and the way Vince Vaughn met his end, and how violent it was when Mel Gibson shot her, and then how the character of Henry saw that, and then rightfully was weary of Mel Gibson after that. He's like, yeah, I saw you kill a naked lady. Good job.
What?
Yeah.
Did Mel Gibson have another choice in that situation? I mean,
I would have done the same thing. Like, it's probably gut reaction.
Shooting
like,
him.
yeah, you shot my friend twice.
I mean, he's made a lot of bad decisions to get to that spot. So I'm not like,
I
saying
think
that he's innocent. But
I think like even Vince Vaughn was like, you didn't have to kill her though. So I think the movie wants you to believe that he could have disarmed her, because it was very clear she was under duress.
I guess, yeah.
But I also think that we're not supposed to hate Mel Gibson for shooting her either.
Yeah, it happened so fast to me that it was almost like he shot her before he could even realize that she actually shot Vince Vaughn. So it almost seemed like a knee-jerk, like someone's pulling a gun and shooting. Yeah. I will shoot that person.
Right,
Which,
exactly.
A lot of people would probably do the same thing, racist cop or not.
Yeah,
right.
One of the things that I think works best about this scene is that Henry escapes very early on. And for large parts of the scene, we do not know where he is.
Yeah.
And we don't follow him. And that is this presence lurking, this unknown like X factor that can come in at any moment during all of this stuff that's happening.
And which side is he going to come in on, right?
Yeah, and that's one thing I really, really liked in terms of like script and development of this scene, is like it's always just this thing in the back of your mind of like, Henry is out there somewhere.
I know.
Is he running?
And
I don't know.
Yeah, and as soon as Vince Vaughn's dead, you're like, oh no. When Henry enters back into the picture, Mel Gibson is the worst character he could have had to interact with.
Right.
If they're going to end up on the same side.
It kind of reminded me of a more recent movie with Brie Larson in it. What was it? Shootout or Shoot 'em Up or
Free Fire.
Free Fire. Not anything of what I just said.
No,
but Free Fire.
Not even close.
Free Fire was a fun movie, I thought.
Yeah, it's like basically the last hour of the film of drag across concrete spread out over a whole film. Anyways, it's pretty good. I like it a lot. Anyways, not the point.
Yeah. Does anybody have anything else?
Not me.
I have one more thing I just want to talk about and touch on and ask you guys.
Okay.
That would be the very, very end scene with Henry, where his family is all rich because of all the gold that he got away with, and he sits down to play the video games with his wheelchaired, I guess it's his brother?
Yeah.
I believe so, yeah.
Jungle Safari.
Yeah, they pick up their Jungle Safari game. Well, I don't know. What did you guys make of that scene? Because I don't know that it felt important, but it also kind of just blew over my mind. I didn't quite get it, personally.
Well, he sent the money to Mel Gibson's family, and we see him get the money from them. And then he's talking to his brother, and his brother's playing a different game, right? And then he wants to play Jungle Safari.
Shotgun Safari is the name.
Okay, yeah,
Shotgun
that's
Safari.
what it is.
That makes sense. I don't know. I don't know that it's saying anything more. He doesn't seem like he's happy now, necessarily. He's taking care of his family, but I don't know. What do you think, Mike?
Were you going to say something, Justin?
Yeah, I think it's worth remembering the earlier scene where they're playing the game. And I'm trying to remember, but I'm pretty sure that Henry isn't that into the game, and he wasn't very good at it. And this time he seems more willing and more interested in playing.
Yeah, I mean, it could be that, like, once you finally make it, you have time to focus and unwind. I don't know. I have no idea. It seems kind of simple.
Shotgun Safari is supposed to be like some sort of metaphor, you think, for like what they just went through, like living in the city, dealing with, like oftentimes like New York is referred to as a jungle. So like, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the game made to what it seemed like to me was not so much like one of those hunting simulation games as much as go out into the jungle with a shotgun and shoot up a bunch of stuff. It's the one thing that I do keep thinking back on is like that scene and trying to parse it. And the rest of the movie makes me question whether that's a moot task that I may be like spinning my wheels on and I'll get nowhere.
Yeah. I guess we'll just have to do another watch.
One day when I don't have to pay to like rent it and it's somewhere streaming for free.
I would be interested to see you guys watch Bone Tomahawk or Brawl in Cell Block 99.
I'm interested in both those. We will watch this again when it becomes part of the Criterion Collection.
Yes, we will.
Yeah, maybe. I'm more interested in Bone Tomahawk and Brawl in Cell Block 99 than I have ever been before. I'll say that much.
Yeah. Well, watch them. Let me know what you guys think. I think they're very similar in tone. I don't know. I think I like this one best, but I don't know. Like I said, I'm not enthusiastic yet, but it probably won't be until the next like S. Craig Zahler film comes out that I'll reassess everything again.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe something we should do is we'll hold on to those two movies until there's like another Dumbo weekend. And we can watch one of like Bone Tomahawk and talk about that instead of Dumbo.
Can we coin the phrase Dumbo weekend for like anytime there's not a great movie that we want to cover coming out? We'll just call it a Dumbo weekend.
It's casual Cinecast canon.
Love it.
All right. I like it.
Yeah. So if there's nothing else, I think that's it for the show, right?
That does it for me.
I believe so.
We talked longer about Dragged Across Concrete than I thought we would.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the conversation, though, to be honest. It was a good conversation, I think.
Yeah, definitely.
Pat on my back. Good job.
Yeah, good job, Chris.
Well, hopefully you all enjoyed the conversation, too. Thank you so much for listening. And, of course, as always, thanks Jake Wagner-Russell for doing our intro and outro music. If you want to hear more of his music, you can do so at soundcloud.com/bopscotch.
Stay tuned to this podcast feed. Pretty soon we will be releasing a Casually Criterion episode on Safety Last, Spine number 662.
Mm-hmm.
And then next week we will probably be doing what comes out? Oh, Pet Sematary.
I believe is the most likely choice that we will go with.
Yeah, and then also one or two of us will probably see Shazam and talk about it as well. But the main review will likely be Pet Sematary. So
one of us has already seen it.
Or B Square, or yeah, whatever, Chris.
Yeah. Also worth noting, if you're interested in our Criterion episodes, as always, at the end of that, we have a new poll to choose our next one. So, well, I guess not by the time you're hearing this, but by the time that episode comes out, we'll have a new poll for you to vote on. So, and again, to vote on that, go to Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Casual Cinecast and follow us so you can keep up with what we're doing.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for listening, guys, and we will see you next time.
Bye-bye.
See you later.